Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and onto the massive space station that served as the Galactic Council headquarters. The station was bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. Lights from hundreds of different alien ships sparkled around the structure like stars. He carried only a small briefcase and wore his best diplomatic uniform. At 45 years old, Jake looked like any other government official heading to an important meeting. His gray hair was neatly combed and his shoes were polished to perfection, but his eyes told a different story. They moved constantly, taking in every detail of his surroundings. He noticed the security cameras, the guard positions, and the 3 different escape routes from the docking bay. Old habits never died. Lisa Hayes walked beside him. She was his aide, and the only other human on the diplomatic team. Lisa had served under Jake years ago, though neither of them mentioned that fact to the alien officials who greeted them. As far as the aliens knew, Jake was just another peaceful diplomat from the small blue planet called Earth. The greeting party consisted of 6 different alien species. They all looked down at the 2 humans with barely hidden contempt. The leader was a tall, thin creature with purple skin and 4 arms. He introduced himself as Chancellor Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. His voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Welcome to our station, humans," Vextar said. The way he said humans made it sound like a dirty word. "We hope your stay here will be educational." Jake smiled politely. "Thank you, Chancellor. We're honored to be here and excited to begin discussions about Earth joining the Galactic Council." Several aliens in the group made sounds that might have been laughter. A massive creature covered in thick plates of armor stepped forward. This was Commander Thakmor, the station's security chief. He belonged to a warrior species called the Krillians. Thakmor stood nearly 8 feet tall and had 4 powerful arms ending in clawed hands. "Join the council?" Thakmor rumbled. "Your species barely knows how to leave its own solar system. What could you possibly offer us?" Lisa started to respond, but Jake gently touched her arm. She fell silent immediately. Jake had taught her that lesson years ago during their military service together. Sometimes the best response was no response at all. The aliens led them through the station's corridors. The walls were covered in strange symbols and artwork from dozens of different worlds. Alien citizens stopped to stare at the humans as they passed. Some pointed and whispered. Others just looked confused as if they couldn't understand why such primitive creatures were allowed on the station. Their quarters were small, but comfortable. Jake inspected the rooms carefully while Lisa activated a small device that would prevent electronic surveillance. Another old habit from their previous careers. "They think we're jokes," Lisa said once they were alone. "Good," Jake replied calmly. "Let them think that." The next morning brought their first formal meeting with the council representatives. The meeting room was enormous, with a curved ceiling that showed a view of the stars outside. 12 different species were represented around a circular table. Jake and Lisa took their seats at the only remaining spots. Chancellor Vextar called the meeting to order. "We are here to consider the request from the species called humans to join our council. Before we begin, perhaps our guests would like to tell us about themselves." Jake stood and activated a holographic display. Images of Earth appeared in the air above the table. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds swirling in beautiful patterns. Several aliens seemed impressed despite themselves. "Earth is our home," Jake began. "We have 7 billion people living on one planet. We have developed space travel, established colonies on nearby worlds, and begun terraforming operations on Mars. We believe we can contribute to the galactic community through our knowledge of planetary engineering, our cultural diversity, and our commitment to peaceful exploration." A lizard-like alien with scales that shifted color interrupted him. "Peaceful exploration? Our intelligence reports say your species has been at war with itself for thousands of years." "That's true," Jake admitted without hesitation. "We have fought many wars, but we have also learned from them. We understand the cost of conflict, which is why we now prefer diplomacy." The aliens around the table exchanged glances. A creature that looked like a walking tree spoke up. "Your military technology is primitive compared to ours. Your ships are slow and your weapons are crude. What protection could you offer the Council against external threats?" "We don't expect to provide military protection," Jake replied. "We hope to contribute in other ways. Our scientists have made significant advances in medicine, agriculture, and engineering. We believe cooperation benefits everyone." More laughter from several council members. Chancellor Vextar raised one of his 4 hands for silence. The humans seem very confident in their abilities, perhaps too confident for such a young and inexperienced species. The meeting continued for several hours. Each alien representative took turns questioning Jake about human capabilities, culture, and intentions. Jake answered every question calmly and thoroughly. He never raised his voice or showed frustration, even when the questions became openly insulting. Lisa watched her former commander handle the hostile aliens with the same patience he had once shown during dangerous negotiations with enemy commanders. She remembered how Jake could sit perfectly still for hours while planning a mission, considering every possible outcome. His calmness had saved their lives more than once. As the day wore on, the aliens became more aggressive in their questioning. They suggested that humans were too violent to join a peaceful organization. They questioned whether Earth's resources were worth the trouble of dealing with such a primitive species. Some openly suggested that humans should be classified as a protected species, like rare animals, rather than potential equals. Through it all, Jake maintained his diplomatic composure. He thanked them for their concerns, addressed each point logically, and continued to present humanity's case for membership. But Lisa noticed small changes in his posture that the aliens missed. His hands rested differently on the table. His weight shifted slightly in his chair. His breathing became deeper and more controlled. She had seen these changes before, years ago, when they were soldiers together. Jake was preparing for something, though she couldn't tell what. The aliens continued their verbal attacks, unaware that they were slowly awakening something in the quiet human diplomat that they really didn't want to meet. Chancellor Vexitar sat in his private office with 3 other council leaders after the first day of meetings with the humans. The room was decorated with trophies from worlds that had submitted to Zephyrian rule. Golden artifacts and rare crystals filled shelves along the walls. The Chancellor poured himself a glass of blue liquid that steamed when it hit the air. "The humans are more stubborn than I expected," he said to his companions. Commander Thakmor stood near the window, his 4 arms crossed over his massive chest. Beside him sat Counselor Sekra, a serpentine creature with bright yellow eyes. The 3rd alien was General Vorthak, whose species looked like walking rocks with glowing red veins running through their bodies. "Their diplomat shows no fear," Thakmor observed. "Most species would have backed down by now when faced with our obvious superiority." Sekra flicked her forked tongue. "Perhaps they are too stupid to understand their position. Some species lack the intelligence to recognize when they are outmatched. Or perhaps," General Vorthak said slowly, "they believe they have something to offer that we do not. This concerns me more than their stupidity would." Chancellor Vexitar waved one hand dismissively. "They have nothing we need. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their military is laughable. Their entire species could not defeat even one of our patrol fleets. Then why not simply reject their application and send them home?" Sekra asked. The Chancellor smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Because other young species are watching. If we allow these humans to waste our time without consequences, every primitive world in the galaxy will think they can demand council membership. We need to make an example." Thakmor straightened up, his warrior instincts responding to the Chancellor's tone. "What kind of example?" "Tomorrow we will hold a formal hearing. We will reject their application publicly and explain exactly why their species is unworthy of joining civilized society. If their diplomat protests too strongly, you will demonstrate why physical resistance is futile." "You want me to hurt the human?" Thakmor asked. "I want you to intimidate him. Show him and anyone watching what happens when inferior species challenge their betters. A few broken bones should be sufficient to make the point." General Vorthak shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Is physical violence necessary? The human has shown proper diplomatic courtesy." "Courtesy means nothing without strength to back it up," Chancellor Vextar replied. "These humans think their politeness makes them equal to us. Tomorrow they will learn otherwise." The next morning, Jake Morrison woke early and performed his usual routine. He exercised for 30 minutes in their small quarters, moving through forms that looked like a slow dance but were actually deadly combat techniques. Lisa recognized the movements from their military training. She had seen Jake practice these same exercises every morning for years, even during the worst combat situations. "Expecting trouble today?" she asked quietly. "Always," Jake replied without breaking his rhythm, but hoping for the best. They dressed in their formal diplomatic uniforms and made their way to the main council chamber. This room was even larger than the meeting room from the day before. Hundreds of seats surrounded a central platform where the human delegation would make their final presentation. Many of the seats were filled with aliens from different species, all curious to see how the council would handle these strange newcomers. Jake and Lisa took their positions at a small table on the platform. Jake placed his briefcase beside his chair and folded his hands on the table. He looked completely relaxed, like a man about to discuss the weather, rather than his species' future in galactic society. Chancellor Vextar entered with great ceremony, followed by the other council leaders. They took their seats at an elevated platform that allowed them to look down on the humans. The Chancellor activated a recording device that would broadcast the proceedings to interested parties across the galaxy. "We have reviewed the human application for council membership," Chancellor Vextar announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "We find it lacking in every respect. Your technology is primitive, your military is weak, and your species has no unique contributions to offer galactic civilization." Jake stood calmly. "Chancellor, with respect, I believe our presentation yesterday showed several areas where human knowledge could benefit the Council. Our advances in terraforming alone could help dozens of member species expand to new worlds. Your terraforming techniques are crude compared to ours," Councillor Sekra hissed. "You move dirt and plant trees. We reshape entire planetary atmospheres with precision you cannot imagine." "Perhaps," Jake replied, "but our methods use 90% less energy and can be implemented by any species regardless of their technological level. Sometimes simple solutions work better than complex ones." The aliens in the audience murmured among themselves. A few seemed interested in what Jake was saying, which clearly annoyed Chancellor Vextar. "Enough," the Chancellor snapped. "Your application is denied. Earth will not be granted membership in the Galactic Council. Furthermore, we recommend that your species abandon any further attempts to expand beyond your solar system. You are not ready for the responsibilities that come with galactic citizenship." Jake remained standing. "I understand your decision, Chancellor, but I must respectfully request that you reconsider. Humanity has much to offer, and we are committed to peaceful cooperation with all species." "The decision is final," Chancellor Vextar said, his voice rising. "You will return to your primitive world and inform your leaders that the galaxy has no place for your kind." "I cannot accept that decision," Jake said quietly. "My government sent me here to secure Earth's membership in this council, and I intend to fulfill that mission." The Chancellor's face darkened with anger. He had expected the human to surrender gracefully when faced with overwhelming rejection. Instead, this creature was actually defying the Council's authority in front of hundreds of witnesses. Chancellor Vextar looked at Commander Thakmor and nodded slightly. The massive Krillian warrior rose from his seat and began walking toward the platform where Jake stood. The alien's forearms flexed as he moved, and his claws extended from his fingertips. Every step echoed through the suddenly quiet chamber. Lisa reached for the weapon hidden beneath her diplomatic jacket, but Jake raised his left hand just slightly. She froze, her training overriding her protective instincts. Whatever Jake was planning, he wanted to handle it himself. Thakmor climbed onto the platform and towered over the human diplomat. Up close, the size difference was even more dramatic. The Krillian warrior weighed at least 400 pounds and stood nearly 3 feet taller than Jake. "Your council has made its decision, human," Thakmor growled. "It is time for you to leave." Jake looked up at the massive alien without any visible concern. His hands remained folded on the table behind him. His breathing stayed steady and controlled. He looked like a man waiting patiently for a bus rather than facing a creature that could tear him apart with its bare claws. "I understand the Council's position," Jake said calmly, "but I'm afraid I cannot comply with their decision. Perhaps we could discuss this further." Thakmor's forearms reached toward the human diplomat. What happened next lasted exactly 3.5 seconds, but every alien in the chamber would remember it for the rest of their lives. Commander Thakmor reached down with all 4 arms to grab the small human diplomat. His plan was simple. Lift Jake off the ground, shake him a little, maybe crack a few ribs, and demonstrate why no one defied the Galactic Council. Thakmor had done this hundreds of times to troublemakers from other species. Humans looked even weaker than most. Jake Morrison moved like water. The Krillian's 4 arms suddenly became a disadvantage instead of an asset. Jake slipped between them with movements so fluid they seemed impossible. His body bent and twisted in ways that defied what the aliens thought they knew about human anatomy. One moment he was standing calmly at the table. The next moment he was behind the massive warrior. Thakmor tried to turn around, but Jake was already moving again. The human's hands touched specific points on the alien's body with surgical precision. Not punches or strikes, but careful pressure applied to joints and nerve clusters that even the heavily armored Krillian couldn't protect. The first shoulder popped out of its socket with a wet sound that echoed through the silent chamber. Then the second, Thakmor tried to roar in pain and rage, but Jake's fingers had already found the pressure points in his throat. The sound came out as a weak wheeze. The massive warrior crashed to the platform floor. His forearms hung uselessly at his sides. His breathing came in short gasps through his damaged throat. Jake stood over him for a moment, checking his work like a mechanic examining an engine. Then he straightened his diplomatic jacket and returned to his seat at the table. The entire sequence had been so fast that most aliens were still processing what they had seen. The chamber erupted in confused shouts and panicked movements. Some aliens tried to run for the exits. Others reached for weapons. Security guards rushed toward the platform, then stopped when they saw their commander lying helpless on the floor. Jake sat calmly in his chair, his hands folded on the table exactly as they had been before. His breathing was steady and his expression unchanged. He looked like a man who had just finished reading a newspaper rather than someone who had just defeated a trained warrior twice his size. Chancellor Vextar stared at the human in shock and growing terror. "What are you?" he whispered. Lisa Hayes finally spoke. Her voice carried clearly through the chaos in the chamber. "Council members, allow me to properly introduce Ambassador Jake Morrison. Colonel Jake Morrison, retired commander of the Earth Special Operations Division. 23 years of active service across 7 different combat zones. His soldiers called him the Ghost Walker." The chamber fell silent again. Several alien species had heard rumors about Earth's military forces, but they had assumed the stories were exaggerated. No species could really be that dangerous and still claim to be peaceful. Jake spoke for the first time since the fight. His voice was exactly the same as before, calm and diplomatic, but now it carried an undertone that made every alien in the room take a step backward. "I came here as a diplomat because I believe in peace, Chancellor. I still do. But I also believe in being prepared for those who don't share that belief." He gestured toward the injured Krillian without looking away from Vextar. "Commander Thakmor will recover fully in a few days. His injuries look worse than they are." Medical teams rushed onto the platform to help the fallen warrior. They lifted him carefully onto a floating stretcher, their movements quick and nervous. Thakmor's eyes remained open, staring at Jake with a mixture of pain and newfound respect. "You said our military was weak." Jake continued conversationally. "You may want to reconsider that assessment." General Vorthak leaned forward in his seat. "Are all human diplomats trained fighters?" "Every single one," Jake confirmed. "We learned long ago that the universe isn't always kind to those who can't protect themselves. Every human you meet in a diplomatic role has military background. Intelligence operations, special forces, frontline combat, strategic planning. We train them in diplomatic protocol and trust them to handle first contact situations." Counselor Sekra's scales shifted from yellow to pale white. "Your peacekeepers are warriors?" "Our warriors became peacekeepers," Lisa corrected. "There's a difference. We don't send soldiers to make war. We send soldiers to prevent war." Jake stood again, this time moving with the same fluid grace he had shown during the fight. Several security guards reached for their weapons, then thought better of it when they remembered what had happened to their commander. "Let me explain something about human diplomacy," Jake said. "On Earth we have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. We prefer to solve problems with words, but we prepare for the possibility that words might not be enough." He walked to his briefcase and removed a small data pad. "Those peaceful exploration vessels your scouts observed. They're commanded by former military officers. Our terraforming operations are managed by combat engineers. Even our cultural exchange students receive basic military training before leaving Earth." Chancellor Vextar found his voice. "If your diplomats are this formidable, what are your actual military forces capable of?" Jake's smile was polite but completely terrifying. "I genuinely hope, Chancellor, that you never have cause to find out. Our military exists to protect Earth and its colonies. We have no interest in conquest or expansion through force, but we are very good at defending what belongs to us." He returned to his seat and reopened his briefcase. "Now then, I believe we were discussing Earth's application for Council membership. As I mentioned, humanity has several unique contributions to offer galactic civilization. The aliens stared at him in disbelief. He was acting as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just disabled their strongest warrior with his bare hands. His transition back to diplomatic mode was somehow more unsettling than his display of violence had been. Perhaps, Jake continued, pulling out holographic displays of human achievements, we could discuss our advances in sustainable energy production. Earth has successfully converted entirely to fusion power, with zero environmental impact. We'd be happy to share this technology with council members. Lisa activated her own display, showing images of human colonies on distant worlds. We've also developed techniques for rapid habitat construction using local materials. Our colonies become self-sufficient within 6 months of establishment. The council members looked at each other uncertainly. Everything had changed in the span of those 3.5 seconds. The weak primitive humans they had planned to humiliate and dismiss were clearly something else entirely. Jake waited patiently for their response, his hands folded calmly on the table. He had made his point. Now he would see if the aliens were smart enough to understand it. The medical team finished loading Commander Thakmor onto their stretcher. As they carried him toward the exit, the wounded Krillian managed to speak in a weak but clear voice. "The human could have killed me," he said. He chose not to. Every alien in the chamber heard those words. They understood the implications. Jake Morrison hadn't been showing off or trying to prove his strength. He had been showing restraint. The Ghostwalker had returned to being a diplomat, but everyone present now understood that the transformation could happen again at any moment. Chancellor Vextar called for a recess after the medical teams carried Commander Thakmor away. The council members needed time to process what they had witnessed and discuss their options. Jake and Lisa remained seated at their table while aliens filed out of the chamber in nervous groups, whispering among themselves. That was either brilliant or completely insane, Lisa said quietly once they were alone. Maybe both, Jake replied. But they needed to understand that we're not helpless children asking for protection. We're equals who happen to prefer peace. When the council reconvened an hour later, the atmosphere in the chamber had changed completely. The aliens who returned looked at the two humans with wary respect instead of contempt. Several species that hadn't bothered attending the morning session now filled previously empty seats. Chancellor Vextar took his position at the elevated platform. His forearms trembled slightly as he activated the recording equipment. The council has discussed the morning's events. We would like to better understand human diplomatic practices. Jake stood smoothly. Of course, Chancellor. What would you like to know? General Vorthok spoke first. You claim that all human diplomats have military training. How extensive is this training? Every human in our diplomatic corps has a minimum of 8 years military service, Jake explained. They complete advanced combat training, intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and leadership development. Only after proving themselves in these areas do they receive diplomatic education. Councillor Sekro's scales shifted to a nervous green color. Why would a peaceful species require such extensive combat training for diplomats? Lisa activated a holographic display showing images from human history. Battles, wars, negotiations, peace treaties. Because we learned from our mistakes, Counselor. For thousands of years, humans sent our most peaceful, educated citizens to handle diplomacy. Many of them died when negotiations failed and violence erupted. We decided, Jake continued, that our diplomats needed to be capable of surviving long enough to keep talking. Peace negotiations can't continue if the negotiators are dead. A new voice spoke from the audience. An elderly alien with silver skin and large black eyes had entered the chamber during the recess. Jake recognized him as Elder Miktal, one of the oldest and most respected members of the council. Colonel Morrison, Elder Miktal said, you speak of learning from mistakes. What lessons has humanity learned from its military history? Jake paused thoughtfully before answering. We learned that the strongest military is the one that never has to fight. We learned that the best victory is the one achieved without battle. Most importantly, we learned that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. And explain, Elder Miktal requested. On Earth, we have many different nations, cultures, and belief systems. For centuries, these differences led to constant warfare. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times. Then we realized that diversity wasn't our weakness, it was our strength. Lisa picked up the explanation. Instead of trying to make everyone the same, we learned to make everyone valuable. Every culture, every perspective, every way of thinking contributes something unique to human civilization. This is why, Jake said, we believe we can contribute to galactic civilization. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest, but because we've learned how to turn differences into advantages. Chancellor Vextar leaned forward. You keep speaking of peace, but you've just demonstrated that your species is capable of significant violence. How do we reconcile these contradictions? There's no contradiction, Jake replied calmly. Violence and peace are not opposites. The opposite of peace is chaos. Violence can sometimes restore order and protect the innocent, but it should always be the last option, not the first. He gestured toward where Commander Thakmor had fallen. Your security chief attacked me without provocation. I could have killed him, but that would have created chaos and endangered innocent bystanders. Instead, I stopped the threat with minimal harm and maximum efficiency. Elder McTall nodded slowly. And if he had been trying to kill you? Then he would be dead, Jake said simply. But he wasn't trying to kill me. He was trying to intimidate me. So I intimidated him back, then offered to continue our diplomatic discussion. General Vorthak rumbled with what might have been laughter. You call permanently disabling our strongest warrior intimidation? He'll recover completely in a few days, Jake pointed out. If I had wanted to intimidate you, I would have made his injuries permanent. If I had wanted to threaten you, I would have killed him and asked who wanted to be next. The chamber fell silent as the aliens processed this distinction. Jake's restraint hadn't been mercy or weakness. It had been a carefully calculated message about human capabilities and intentions. Counselor Sekra asked the question that was troubling many of the alien representatives. If your diplomatic corps consists of trained warriors, what are your actual military forces like? Jake and Lisa exchanged a look. This was the question they had hoped to avoid, but it was inevitable after the morning's demonstration. Our military, Lisa began carefully, exists to protect Earth and our colonies. Every human military unit trains for defensive operations. We have no conquest fleets or invasion armies. That doesn't answer the question, General Vorthak observed. Jake sighed. Our military forces are classified into several categories. Planetary defense forces protect our worlds and orbital installations. Fleet commands protect our shipping lanes and colonies. Special operations divisions handle situations that require precision rather than overwhelming force. Like diplomatic security? Elder McTall asked. Among other things, Jake confirmed. But our military philosophy is based on preparation, not aggression. We train extensively for scenarios we hope never happen. Every human soldier practices for situations ranging from asteroid impacts to hostile alien invasions. Hostile alien invasions? Chancellor Vextar repeated. We had no idea whether other species would be friendly or aggressive when we first left our solar system, Lisa explained. So we prepared for both possibilities. Our exploration vessels are equipped with defensive systems. Our colonies have emergency protocols. Our military trains for combat against opponents with unknown capabilities. Jake added, every human child learns basic emergency procedures in school. Every adult completes mandatory service training. If Earth were ever threatened, our entire population could become a defensive force within hours. The aliens looked at each other with growing unease. They were beginning to understand that humanity's approach to peace was fundamentally different from their own. Most species achieved peace through weakness, submission, or isolation. Humans had achieved peace through strength, preparation, and the willingness to fight only when necessary. This is why, Jake continued, we believe Earth deserves membership in the Galactic Council. We don't need protection from other species. We don't require economic support or technological assistance. We want to participate in galactic civilization because cooperation benefits everyone. Elder McTall spoke quietly. What would humanity do if the Council continued to reject your application? Jake considered the question seriously. We would respect your decision and withdraw our request. Earth would continue developing independently. We would maintain peaceful relations with any species that chose to trade or communicate with us. We would defend ourselves if threatened, but we would not seek revenge or retaliation against the Council. And if other young species saw that humans were denied membership? General Vorthak asked. They would make their own decisions based on their own needs and capabilities, Jake replied. But they might wonder why a peaceful, technologically advanced species was rejected, while more aggressive civilizations were welcomed. The implication was clear without being threatening. Other species were watching these proceedings. The Council's decision would influence how the entire galaxy viewed their leadership and judgment. Chancellor Vextar realized that the situation had become far more complex than a simple rejection of an inferior species. These humans represented a new kind of challenge to established galactic order. They were strong enough to be dangerous, smart enough to be valuable allies, and disciplined enough to be trusted with power. The question was no longer whether humans deserved membership in the Council. The question was whether the Council could afford to make enemies of such a species. The Council chambers remained tense during the afternoon session. Jake Morrison continued his presentation about human achievements and potential contributions to galactic society. But everyone present understood that the real negotiation was happening beneath the surface. The morning's violence had changed everything. Jake displayed holographic images of human terraforming projects. Green worlds where barren rocks had once orbited distant stars, cities built into asteroid mining operations, space stations that served as waypoints for deep exploration missions. Our terraforming techniques use biological adaptation rather than atmospheric manipulation, he explained to the assembled aliens. We introduce carefully modified plant and animal species that gradually transform planetary environments. The process takes longer than mechanical terraforming, but the results are more stable and sustainable. Elder Miktal studied the images with obvious interest. How long does this biological terraforming require? Between 50 and 100 years for a complete transformation, Lisa answered. But the worlds become habitable for most oxygen-breathing species within the first decade. General Vorthak leaned forward. And these modified organisms? Do they pose any threat to existing ecosystems? Every organism is designed with built-in genetic safeguards, Jake replied. They cannot survive outside their intended environments, and they're programmed to become sterile after a certain number of generations. We learned early in our expansion that biological contamination could destroy entire worlds. Counselor Sekra's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue color. This suggests that humans have experience with ecological disasters. Unfortunately, yes, Jake confirmed. Earth suffered severe environmental damage during our industrial development period. We nearly made our own world uninhabitable before we learned better management techniques. Those painful lessons shaped our approach to colonization. Chancellor Vextar had been unusually quiet during the technical presentations. Finally, he spoke. These achievements are impressive, but they do not address our primary concern about human membership. Which is? Jake asked politely. Integration, the Chancellor replied. The Council functions because member species share similar values and approaches to conflict resolution. Humans appear to have a fundamentally different philosophy regarding the use of force. Jake nodded thoughtfully. You're right, Chancellor. Human philosophy regarding force is different from what I've observed in Council species. Would you like me to explain our perspective? Please. Jake stood and walked to the center of the platform. Most species achieve peace through one of three methods. Some become so powerful that others fear to challenge them. Some become so weak that others see no point in conquering them. Others isolate themselves from potential conflicts entirely. He paused to ensure his words were being translated correctly for species with different communication methods. Humans chose a fourth path. We became strong enough to defend ourselves, but not so aggressive that others needed to fear us. We prepare extensively for conflict, so that conflicts become less likely. Most importantly, we made peace more valuable than war. How? Elder Miktal asked. By making cooperation profitable, Lisa answered. Every human nation discovered that trade and cultural exchange produced more wealth and security than conquest ever could. We applied this same principle to our expansion into space. Jake returned to his display controls and showed images of human trading posts and cultural centers throughout nearby star systems. Earth's colonies don't extract resources to send home. They develop local economies and trade networks. Human settlers don't displace native species. They adapt to existing ecosystems and often help preserve endangered environments. This approach, he continued, makes human worlds valuable as partners rather than targets. No one wants to destroy a trading partner that makes them wealthy. No one wants to attack allies who help solve their problems. Chancellor Vextar considered this explanation. And when this cooperative approach fails? When faced with truly hostile species? Jake's expression became more serious. Then we defend ourselves with the same thoroughness that we pursue peace. But we always try cooperation first, and we never use more force than necessary to stop the threat. An alien Jake hadn't seen before entered the chamber during this exchange. This creature resembled a walking crystal formation, with points of light flickering throughout its translucent body. Jake recognized the species as architects, the engineers who had designed most of the galaxy's space stations and planetary defense systems. The architect spoke in a voice like chiming bells. "I am Constructor Prime Zarthul. I have been monitoring these proceedings and wish to ask the humans a direct question." "Of course," Jake replied. "Your military preparations suggest that you expect to encounter hostile species during your expansion. Do you have specific threats in mind, or is this general paranoia?" Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded slightly. They had hoped to avoid this topic, but direct questions deserved honest answers. "Constructor Prime, our deep space monitoring stations have detected signs of hostile activity in distant regions of the galaxy. Energy signatures consistent with large-scale warfare. Debris patterns suggesting the destruction of inhabited worlds. We don't know who or what is responsible, but we know that something dangerous exists beyond Council territory." The chamber erupted in surprised voices from multiple species. Several Council members looked shocked, while others appeared troubled but not surprised. Elder Miktal called for order. "The humans speak of distant conflicts. Some Council members have also detected these signals. We have chosen not to investigate them directly." "Why?" Jake asked. "Because," General Vorthak answered heavily, "we lack the military capability to handle such threats. Our combined fleets are designed for peacekeeping and defense of established territories. They would be insufficient for large-scale warfare." The implication hung in the air like a physical presence. The Galactic Council, for all their technological advancement and cultural sophistication, were not prepared for serious military threats. Jake spoke carefully. "Perhaps this is another area where human experience could benefit Council security. We've spent thousands of years learning how to fight wars we didn't want. That knowledge might prove valuable if peaceful species face aggressive ones." Constructor Prime Zarthul flickered brighter. "The humans offer military alliance in exchange for Council membership." "No," Jake replied firmly. "We offer friendship, trade, and mutual assistance. If Council members ever faced external threats, Earth would help defend them, because that's what friends do. But we're not mercenaries looking for employment." Chancellor Vextar stood slowly. "I believe the Council needs to deliberate privately before making our final decision. This session is recessed until tomorrow morning." As the aliens filed out of the chamber, Jake and Lisa remained at their table. They had presented their case as completely as possible. Now they would wait to see if the galaxy was ready for humanity. "Think we convinced them?" Lisa asked. "Some of them," Jake replied. "Whether that's enough remains to be seen." That evening, news of the day's events spread throughout the space station and beyond. Reports of the human diplomats' combat abilities traveled through alien communication networks at light speed. Some species were impressed by human restraint and skill. Others were frightened by human capacity for violence. But everyone was talking about the newcomers from the small blue planet. The galaxy had learned its first important lesson about humanity. They were not the weak, primitive species that had first appeared in Council records. Jake Morrison spent the evening in his quarters, preparing for whatever decision the Council reached. He had done his job as a diplomat. He had presented humanity's case honestly and completely. Whether Earth joined the galactic community or continued developing independently would depend on alien wisdom and courage. Either way, humanity would survive and prosper. But Jake hoped the Council would choose cooperation over fear. The galaxy was about to become much more interesting, and having friends would make the experience better for everyone.